You're watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm, endorsed by the Hello Deli.
Yeah. Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. Today we got Lee Ellenberg part 2. I loved this conversation. I love all the conversations that we have with these fine folks. We've recorded, I think, 2 or 3 this week that are in the can. Our Christmas episode is done already. Lots of good things happening. Lots of people who are like, okay, we want to do it, but we're going to do it in the new year. Good stuff happening in the land of the Letterman podcast. Very excited about that. Couple things. Obviously, many of the moments that we talk about during these shows are available in 2 places. There's the official Letterman channel, which is adding 2 or 3 videos every single day from the vast catalog of work that was done through these 3 decades or so. Lots of good stuff that's just coming all the time. So a lot of these moments we talk about are available. Go to the official Letterman channel. You can subscribe there. And then, of course, Don Giller's channel. I mean, there is no greater an archivist of Letterman and Company material than and curator, not just an archivist, but a curator of many of these amazing moments. If you want to do a deep dive on some of these people that we talk about, Lee and I talk about Alan Kalter in this episode. There's a beautiful Alan Kalter tribute that is on Don Giller's channel. So those 2 channels I would highly recommend subscribing to if you want to continue down this this deep dive that is the body of work of David Letterman and Company. Today, Lee Ellenberg part 2. You know what? We're still figuring out the voice of this show. All right. I'm a podcast guy, and I've been a podcast guy for a long time. My podcasting influence began probably with Kevin Smith, because I'm also an enthusiast of the work that Kevin Smith did. I loved indie film of the 90s. I was that kid, Gen X kid, and Kevin Smith hit me right between the eyes. He started talking about comic books and superheroes way before it was in fashion to do so. You know, before the first X-Men movie, he was talking about this stuff. If you go watch Mallrats, Stan Lee makes an appearance in Mallrats. I mean, that's so. And if you look at, again, I'm a big Gretzky guy. You don't go where the puck is, you go where the puck is going. Actually, not just a Wayne Gretzky, it's a Walter Gretzky quote. Wayne learned that from his dad. And, Kevin knew where the puck was going when it came to pop culture. He was just so ahead of his time. And he started a podcast called Smodcast years ago. I was a huge enthusiast of that. And the other thing that Kevin Smith always said was, well, if you want to do something, if you love something, just go do it. He went and famously saw Slacker in the, I forget which movie theater it was, very famous New York movie theater. He saw it and he looked up and said, well, this counts. Like I could do this. And then he went and made Clerks. And since all the success that he has gotten, he has influenced people like crazy. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, go start a podcast. And I mean, the step of faith in doing this endeavor here has been so worth already. Like I say, it could end tomorrow if Walter and Worldwide Pants and all that, and all the way up to the top with Dave, if they hit the big red button and said, no, Chisholm, Kate, you're done. We don't want you to do this anymore. I mean, okay, I'd probably have to adhere to that. I don't want to be a rebel against this thing that I love so much, but at the same time, I've already won. And it's because I took advice from Kevin Smith. Joe Rogan, I'm a Rogan guy. I'll listen to Rogan's podcast all the time. They're 3 hours long. Kevin Smith's podcasts can be 1, 2, 3 hours long. So in doing this show, when I sit down with a guy like Lee and we go 2+ hours, I mean, do I release that as one episode? Is it better to bite size it into a 2-parter? I don't know the answer to that. We're just kind of stumbling along and figuring this thing out. This is where the community will help. And I would appreciate that very, very much if you might throw out constructive criticism. Let's not just throw yellow snowballs. Let's have constructive criticism along the way here. And don't get me wrong, I haven't had very many yellow snowballs thrown at us. There's been a couple, but it's been such a good journey so far here, and hearing the insights from these people I mean, yesterday we recorded another one. The day that this episode is released, the Friday, we're recording two, a couple of very, very special guests who are coming on. And I want to know what you feel like as we shape the show. I've got some definite ideas, but I would love to hear what the small micro masses that we have already adopting the show feel about this. So please join the Facebook group. We would love to have you there. Please add any content that you might have or stories. I want to hear your stories. The community is so important about to me about this project and this. No, it's not really even a project. This feels like a life's work. And I know it's weird to say that, but in this moment of where my life is, this is by far my favorite, outside of my family, my very favorite thing. I can't tell you the joy that I get from doing this, to the point where if I continue to talk about it, I'll actually get emotional about it. It's so much fun. It's so great. And having people reach out, the people who have reached out and told me their stories, please, let's do that more. Feel free to post them publicly in the Facebook group. Let's assemble a community here and have some fun celebrating this beautiful body of work and transferring all of these amazing moments. Lee has some great insights here in part two. He compares writing for The Tonight Show to The Late Show. He talks about the magic of working for 30 Rock. That's my word, but the majesty of actually working there, the fact that he is aware that he is part of an evolution, that started with Dave wanting The Tonight Show all the way to Late Shift 1, Late Shift 2. And then you've got people who come along, and they start their careers around the time that things are ending, or at least they see the back half of Letterman thing, and it's like, well, okay, we're still in our 40s, we still got to go to work, and then they go to work for The Tonight Show, and they bring some of these sensibilities over there, and what is the same and what's not. We get into a really good talk about that. He has a really good comparison of The Late Show to the Muppet Show, which I loved. I thought it was such a beautiful, beautiful comparison. And just Lee Ellenberg is such a great guy. And we talk about Joe Grossman a lot, which is a lot of fun too. Alan Kalter, those of who have watched this show know how much I adore Alan Kalter. And we have a really nice talk about him. I'm just really excited about this. As always, of course, the Letterman podcast brought to you in part by Rupert G. and the Hello Deli. Go to hello-deli.com if you want to find any Letterman Late Show with David Letterman related merchandise, and also Rupert G. merchandise. And if you're in the New York area, make the pilgrimage. Head down to the Ed Sullivan Theater. Go get a super sandwich or beverage from Rupert and May down at the Hello Deli. And by the way, the people who are hanging out outside on 53rd Street there, outside of that building, Colbert staffers, many of them, or a few of them anyway, former Late Show staffers as well. And lots of cool things happen hanging out on 53rd Street there. Very, very grateful. Again, broken record talking about that. Thank you very, very much for being a part of the Letterman podcast. Please like, please share, please subscribe. I will say that until the very minimum that I don't have to say that anymore. But enjoy Lee Ellenberg part 2 here on the Letterman podcast. I'm fascinated by all of this. We've kind of set the table to you becoming a writer. Now it's like, okay, talking about Welcome to the Show That Never Ends. I mean,
yeah.
I just, the respect I have for you guys, the analogy that I've taken to using on this show is literally, and the reason this show exists is you guys are miners, and every single day you're picking up metal, whatever it is that you find. You find some, you find some silver, you find some deposits of minerals, more often than not, in my opinion, gold or diamonds. And then, oh, great, this has been great. You take them, you throw them on the ground, discard them, because now it's time to keep mining and trying to find more. You did that 15 years, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
15 years.
And the entire, rest of the run of Late Show. I talk about Dave's evolution so much in this show. We talk about it. I loved Powerful Dave. I make no bones about it. There are so many people who love the experimental nature and the college feel of late night and all that. I love that too. I love it all. But Powerful Dave was my guy. It was like we watched him, playing the, like our favorite band, watch them playing the, the family get-togethers, then small clubs, and then bigger clubs, and now they're doing Shea Stadium. And you got to be a writer for that almost that entire time, where Dave was bigger than whoever was beside him 99% of the time. Crazy time for you to be a writer for that show. When you became a writer, was there something that you focused on more often than not? Was there something that was kind of like, oh yeah, that's Lee's? I know some of the answers to this, but I want to hear kind of your perspective on it first before I start asking.
Not really. I mean, when you become a writer, you're really kind of expected to do it all. I did have a head start in that, because by the time I was made a writer, I'd been submitting material for, going on 3 years.
Right.
So my first day did not feel like a first day. I was just typing in a different office.
Sorry to interrupt, but you'd submit material in all different aspects of the show.
Well, that's a good question. Like you said, top 10 really is the entryway.
That's the gate. That's the door.
It really is. Then when you started to get more comfortable, then you started expanding. That was a very intimidating thing for me, to move from a top 10 to the first time I handed in a script. And like all writers, I look back, or I think back to the things I pitched, and it just makes me cringe. But I remember the first time, again, it was Tim Long. He called me into his office and we discussed it. And, he could not have been more constructive. Even though he probably thought it was garbage, because it was in fact garbage. But, I did ultimately, I did finally gain the confidence. But I remember one time I came to this realization that should have come years earlier, which was, I remember thinking, I woke up one morning, it was like a Saturday at 5 a.m, and I realized, wait a minute, not only do I have to get to the point where I do more than top 10s and I have to write scripts, I have to do it every day.
Yeah.
At this point, like, I'm trying to curate the perfect submission package,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking I'm already there, which means if I get the job tomorrow, I have to hit the ground running. So that was kind of like, that was a frightening moment for me. But I did ultimately, branch out from the top 10. So by the time I became a writer, I had done almost everything except shoot a remote. So I felt like I had written mailbag letters, I'd written live bits, I'd written tons of top 10s or whatever we did, know your current events. It was really only remote bits that I think I had was still so foreign to me. And then as the years went on, I don't know if I had I always saw myself as more of a utility player, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Like, I never felt like I was, and I'm not just saying this, I never felt I was that good at any one thing. I thought I was okay at a lot of things. Like Steve Young, is the kind of guy who will produce something which is just brilliant.
Yeah.
That's not me. I'm more the person who, you want me to do this today? Great. You want me to do that? Fine. But I don't think I've ever been the best writer of any room I've ever been in, but I'm also not the worst writer. So I feel like I'm right in that middle. So I think that if I had a specialty, that's what it was. My specialty was I had no specialty. You could kind of plug me in anywhere.
The collaboration and helping to accentuate things and that sort of thing? Or here's a good question. Was there something early on as a writer, like a premise that you came up with? Was there a premise, one that you're like looking back on? And I know most writers aren't able to even fathom this, but apparently you're pretty well adjusted. So I'm going to ask you, is there anything early on that you are proud of that you're like, yeah, I'm glad I got that one on, or that premise turned out really, really nice.
Okay. No, but let me explain this.
I love the disclaimer. Excellent. Yep.
Yes, I might be wrong about this, but
Okay.
I bet you if you ask most of the writers the same question, again, I could be way, way off on this. The thing that we most remember or we're most fond of is probably the oddest, stupidest, silliest.
Of course it is.
Instead of like,
yes,
this one big piece that I did that was, 4 minutes and this and that. And
no. It's the band whose favorite song in their catalog is a B-side. It's
yeah.
I get that. Absolutely.
Like when I'm together with Joe and Steve, the things that we kind of joke about or the things that we remember most fondly really just entertained us.
Yeah. And that's what I'm asking. That is 100% what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
that fascinates me.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm giving such a disappointing answer. Like, I can't remember one specific thing. I mean, like, for instance, Joe's gonna love this. On Friday, Joe and I watched a clip that I wrote along with Jeremy Weiner, where NASA had developed this urine purification system so that astronauts could turn their own urine into potable water. And so Jeremy and I wrote this thing where Dave says, and look, we have footage of the test in action. And Joe plays an astronaut, and there's a big machine that says, I think, urine purification system or something. And he drinks this big glass, and then he picks up a plug, and he says, forgot to plug it in, still urine. Now, it's as stupid as you could imagine, but for some reason, like something like that, I remember with great fondness. And I know Joe does, I believe, Jeremy does.
Yeah.
It's not that it was the funniest thing I ever did. It certainly wasn't, or the most memorable, but it's moments like that. And I think it's because, I mean, the one great thing about that job was we always tried to make Dave laugh and the people in the room laugh more than the audience.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I'm sure Dave probably wouldn't be thrilled to know that, like, we didn't care if the audience laughed, because I know he did. I would assume he did. He's the one who's got to sit in front of 400 people just staring at him. But if I could make Steve laugh when we were having dinner, I was, thrilled. Or if Steve made me laugh, so it's those little things. And maybe that's why I can't. I mean, I probably could remember
that moment. I want to talk about. No, you did. You done good, Lee. Because I want to talk to you about that moment for a second. Because here's something that I hope edifies you and makes you feel good. Okay, so Joe's on our show. Joe talks about, of course, because I don't know how many times you guys made him drink urine, but he drank urine quite a bit.
Quite a few. Yeah.
Set up great inventive ways of setting up scenarios for him. And one of them, I asked him if he ever broke. And there was one where he broke, where I know what you're going to say. One of the only times, the Herbie Hancock joke, which is
we just watched that too.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, we talk about that on our show. It's on a Friday. We come out on Fridays. On Monday, Walter and company put out the clip of Ox, the survivalist, going and drinking the urine. Okay, Herbie Hancock, he shows him break and all that stuff. So that's kind of neat because it there's some symmetry here. There's some evolution here of it growing. Now I need to disclaim this. I'm not in the habit of reading YouTube comments. Okay. I'm not that guy, because that's a rabbit hole that can destroy self-esteem very, very quickly.
Yeah.
However, in that thread of Walter putting up the clip of Ox drinking that urine, one of the comments in there was, somebody forgot to plug it in. And so really? They were calling back that memory that had not been publicized or thrown out there. They were calling back that exact same joke. Somebody put that comment in there. And so anyway, I just weird how, I read that. And I was like,
I didn't know that.
That's so there you go. Maybe what you guys did actually made more than just Dave and the other staff laugh. The fact that somebody would throw that in there as a callback, that is a very clever comment. And we didn't rehearse this. We didn't, there's no pre-interview here.
True.
But
that's
anyway,
great. That's great. No, I love that stuff. I think Jeremy and I were the first ones to put Joe on the show, and he was always great. And Dave liked him. So and you could see. I think you could see Dave's enjoyment of doing these bits with Joe.
Yes.
But there were so many of them. We used to talk about it all the time. Like the best is, I mean, we're in such a different environment now, but like the writer, because we're a late night show.
Yep.
We come on after the average viewer has consumed a fair amount of news. So, you could say one of our mission statements, or our mission statement, is to kind of give the comedic spin on something they've seen in the news. Well, some days there's just really no news.
Slow news day.
And that used to turn into kind of the most fun day. And we always still talk about, it was a Wednesday and Steve Young, and it was just a brutally slow news day. I mean, look, I yearn for a slow news day now, and Steve Young wrote this whole piece about hump day. It made no sense. I mean, it made sense, but it was just that we're putting on a 30-second or however long piece about it being hump day. And it was like such a great performance by Steve. It's like, what could I do? How do I turn a nothing into something?
Yeah.
That is what I remember most fondly. It's, there's a joke about whatever, about Clinton, about Bush, about whatever. But, to be able to just create your own premise, which is the hardest thing, and create something out of whole cloth. And Steve was always so good at it. That's what I remember so clearly. And it's when I still get together with the writers, those are the moments. Or when we joke about the things that made us laugh, we really don't talk about the more well-known things. We don't talk about David Taco Bell or things like that. We just remember that one joke that Tommy wrote or that Jeremy wrote that just really made us laugh. And it might have made nobody else in the audience laugh. But it just, that also goes back to what you were saying earlier about how many, and I don't think this is specific to comedy writers, but how many people don't laugh at something and they just say, that's funny. That's how I felt when I first saw. If you watched me watching Dave, you would think I was watching C-SPAN, but inside,
a documentary or something.
Right. But, it was just striking that inner tuning fork, and I just thought, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's how I it's how I feel when I watched Modern Romance, but Albert Brooks movie for the first time. It's just, I said, you can't tell by looking at me, but I am enormously entertained right now.
You're spellbound. You're spellbound, and when you're spellbound by something, you're just you're tunnel vision on it almost, and there are no emotional reactions other than I hear you. And the moments you're talking about, by the way, are the moments that they light my fire. I love this stuff. This is the stuff that we're looking for in this show. So obviously the job, your level of comfort evolves to a certain point. Again, breakneck speed. You probably are never comfortable, but at the end of the day, you kind of feel you're starting to get your rhythms and all of that kind of stuff. What was your favorite stuff? Like you did some stuff with Celebrity Interview. That was you, right?
Yeah, I didn't create it. Didn't create it. I believe Carter and Craig created it. And I think they did one. It might have been the Gwyneth Paltrow one. Paltrow? Oh, no. And then I think that's around the time they left the show. And so I think the head writers at the time, Eric and Justin, who had hired me, I think they said, can you do the next one? And that just turned into this, we did it to the very end. So I did take that over, and it did grow a little bit, which was fun. I mean, it largely was the same thing. I mean, like anything, we really sort of like drove it into the ground. But I mean, God, Alan, rest his soul. It was, he was so fantastic. So that was just, that was all him. I mean, like the piece did grow a little bit. We added little embellishments here and there. Really, it was just to make it longer because Alan was so good at it, and Dave enjoyed it. You could always hear Bill Sheff cackling with laughter. Whenever, if you watch them on YouTube, and Alan says, "Oh, you make me sick because you did this and you did that," and Dave said, "That's not how it happened," and Alan would say, "That is exactly how it happened." You could always at that moment hear Bill Sheff cackle with laughter. And my favorite moment, I don't know why, was Alan would say to Dave, "You got a pencil?" And Dave would say, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, then mark this down, asshole."
Yep.
And every time Dave would laugh. And I remember one time Eric and Justin said, "I think we should lose that line." And I said, "You can't lose that line. Lose
Yeah.
anything else." But that was, one fight I won. And they said, "You're right. Leave it back in because it makes Dave laugh." But that's a perfect example. I'm not laughing. Those are not jokes, really. I mean, maybe mark it down, asshole is, but it was just more that, I don't know. It was the way Alan delivered it. There was just, I don't know. It's never the joke that comes head on that makes us laugh.
No.
It's always that very odd, specific thing, that odd sort of round of the way kind of thing that, that's a perfect example. Like the actual jokes where, Alan insults Dave and then he insults the celebrity. Those were great, but it was those little things that I really, really we found entertaining, and which is why we did it for, whatever it was, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect refillable, no question. I look at this and go, but this is what you just said to me. Again, going from Dave, who it's very difficult, pick a comedian and pick a monologue. To get that comedian to do one of Dave's monologues, almost impossible, because and I mean, I remember trying to be that kid who would try and explain the next day after something I saw the night before, Jerry Seinfeld jokes, even Richard Pryor jokes or something, you can go boom, 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 and you can repeat them and you'd get a laugh out of it. With Letterman, it was really tough to do that because so much of it was just based on him, his reaction, the way he said something, the personality.
Yeah.
And now that, again, all of these things, they all go down into the rest of the culture of the show. What you just said about Alan, it's the same thing. It's not funny if 95% of the people were to say it, but if someone said it in the way that Alan said it, there you go. There's the magic there. And you guys captured that and were able to replicate that in kind of a culture of how the show was shaped.
And I will say that, like, because I think you tapped into a larger issue, which is a larger subject, which is those are the people I find funniest in general. People who can make you laugh by not saying a joke, not saying a punchline. Like, Chris Elliott to me was maybe the best I've ever seen. Like, I feel like, stepping away from the show, I feel that way with, Amy Poehler. Melissa McCarthy can do it. Bill Murray can do it. That, but Alan was so great at it.
Yeah.
And then we would write scripts just because we wanted to just wanted to see Alan perform. And I mean, we could do a whole thing just on Alan because he was a TV announcer.
One day we're going to tribute him. So anyway, keep going. But just one day we're going to do a tribute episode to him. We're going to do one to Inky. Anyway, please keep going.
It was just amazing. I mean, I always loved that I was just talking about this with Joe, that I loved that we had a cast of characters, not just 2 or 3 people. We had like 10, 12, 15 people. And it's so funny that I don't know why. I mean, this might be the stupidest comparison you've ever heard, but it just like a couple of weeks ago, it made me realize that we were kind of like the Muppet Show, in that our show was not the show. Our show was, like when Dave would say, sometimes we'd write things about, the celebrity is in his dressing room, and we cut to that. Or, I just got a message, cut to the receptionist. Our show, we were also showing or pretending to show how the show was produced. We were showing Scooter backstage with Kermit. And like that to me is what made the show so fun, is how much we made believe took place backstage, like the
Yes.
cold open of Dave with George Clooney or Dave
Yes.
with Tina Fey. And, that to me was such a fun, it's what made the show so fun to write for,
Yes.
is that it didn't have to be Dave. We could show it Harold Larkin. I've shot a ton of pieces with Harold Larkin, and let me tell you, he really is. People would ask that question a lot of times, like about the different people we would have on the show, like George Clark and Harold Larkin, and I'd say, no, Harold Larkin really is our head carpenter. Harold is a brilliant performer.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where it used to surprise me. Like we would go on field shoots, and I would talk into a mic into his ear, and I would always try to wait until he stopped talking. He'd say, "No, you could." He was like a news anchor. He'd say, "No, talk to me while I'm talking. I can do it." And I'd be
Wow.
feeding him lines as he's having a conversation, and he wouldn't miss a beat. I never knew how he got so good at it, but he really was a natural. But
That's a special
anyway,
skill right there. Not everybody for few
Harold
people have that.
Harold was the easiest person I ever shot with. But
Wow.
it was that really is what I loved as a person who was helping put the show on. But I
Right.
also loved, just now as a fan, that I love that kind of, that's what the show was. That, yes, this is Dave. Like Dave was almost playing the part of a guy hosting a show that was
Yes.
terribly run, even
Yeah.
though it wasn't, obviously. Like that, we
It's
would
the Bad
show,
News Bears running it. Yeah, no. I get that. That's yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we would
the
show
Goonies,
like
the like,
yeah.
and many fans of this of what you guys did are fans of all of those things that I'm talking,
Right.
and the Muppet Show, being a chief example. Without a doubt.
Like Dave would be at the monologue mark, and then Kathy would come out and say, it's so and so's birthday, we need money. And
Yeah.
again, like, and Dave would say, like, couldn't this have waited until the show's over or stuff. But it was the idea that, it's kind of a show, but like, if Kathy has to talk to Dave, she's not going to care that the show's going on. She's just going to do it. Or an intern does something stupid backstage, or it wasn't just we had a cast of characters. I think it was, we had a cast of characters, but we were kind of showing this peek behind the curtain. And again, it was, Tony with the cue cards, or Biff was the stage manager, or George was the building manager. That's what these people's real jobs were.
Yeah.
And so it was just so funny playing into that. That was really great. But I will say, Alan really was special. And just to bring this one part of the conversation full circle, like something like Alan Kalter's Celebrity Interview, the jokes remain largely the same. It really was just the way, like, we just want to see Alan do that again. And he was just, I will say, when we used to do like our fake commercials, we had this incredible stable of voiceover artists. And I learned so much about voice artists just working with these people. But I remember, like, that was one part of the job, which I didn't realize how much fun it would be, but it was. You'd write a script, and then you saw what some of our voiceover artists, like, the late great Rob Webb, or Sarah Krieger, or J.R. Horn, who was in a couple of Coen Brothers films, or Ralph Gunderman, or and then some other performers who were very well known, from stage and screen. It was amazing. You handed them a script, and they just brought Sam Freeds, another Monica Trombetta. They'd bring this life to it, and you thought, you just made it 100 times funnier.
Yeah,
that was something I always thought voiceover artists were just people with good voices, but they're not. They're these really talented men and women, these really great actors who could just make something. I know it sounds corny and cliche, but it really did make them leap off the page. And, Alan was just so good at that. It's, you wrote something which was moderately funny, and then you just, put it in Alan's
unleash
hands,
the
and it was
hounds.
gold.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you talking about this. I also appreciate your time here. I just want to make sure there are 2 or 3 other things I wanted to get to. Are we okay for time for a couple more?
Yeah.
Couple
Yeah.
more things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Outstanding,
Yep.
outstanding. I want to. There's a thread that you talked about there for a second that I want to kind of go back to for a moment. Joe
Yeah.
Grossman, writer, and one of the things that I said in one of the intros, we had a 2-parter with him. One of the intros, I said,
Oh, Joe gets 2 parts. I get it.
well, we're the way we're shaping up. I think you might too.
Okay.
That was a litmus test right there that we just
Sure.
passed. When you said you have enough time, okay, 2 more things, we get 2 parts.
That's quite all right.
So Joe, one of the things that I said in one of his intros was Joe was one of those guys when he would come out. He was one of the guys you would wonder, is he really a writer, or is he one of the actors that was hired to play somebody, like a Lyle the intern
Yeah.
or Jody Ebert, who the fuck you guy, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? You almost you kind of blurred the lines a little bit. But Joe, of course, a writer, friend of yours, all of that stuff. Now, that being said, some writers got the chance to do some stuff in front of the camera famously. Gerard Mulligan, probably the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
But did you ever have any inkling of being a performer? So many writers have a performer that does want to come out sometimes. Did you ever have any of that in you?
Not really, because I think I always had a pretty healthy view of what I can and cannot do. And I'm not a performer. I don't think I have anything that's engaging.
So you never tried stand up or anything like that in your life?
No, no way. That's a skill set that I do not believe I have. I have an enormous respect for stand-ups. That is just a skill set I don't have. And yeah, never. It's that's just something that's way out of my league.
Yeah, I gotcha. But you know what I'm saying though. Some of the writers there or some writers that, I think about guys like, Seth Meyers, for example, is probably the best example of that. But other, people who started as writers ended up as performers. I think that there's Tina Fey, another one. Legend.
I don't.
But that was never you at all.
No, I just never thought that. Oh man, if America gets a load of this, holy. And clearly I was right, because nobody's ever asked me. But no, I think no. Short
just
answer,
not, just flat out, no.
I never. No, I think if there. Look, I wish there was something I could have brought to the table. I mean, Joe, I think when Jeremy and I first, also keep in mind at the Late Show, probably in all places, but at Late Show, these things happened as a throw-off, as a throwaway. Like Jeremy and I were writing something, and I really don't remember what Joe's first thing was. And we just said, what if we get Joe to do it? That's it. That's it. And then there's always this, you don't know how it's going to go. You don't know if how well the performer's going to do. You don't know how well the piece does. You don't know how well Dave's going to respond to it. I mean, there's a number of moving pieces that could, kill something quickly. But I think once you see Dave enjoying it, it's like, well, let's get Joe to do it again. And then it always worked. And, But, for me, I just feel like I'm very much the everyman. Whereas I'm not saying Joe is not an everyman, but I'm just saying he certainly does. It's easier to do an impression of Joe than it is to do of me. It's Joe brought something special. He really did. I mean, he'll probably roll his eyes at that, but it's true. It really was. He was always very good.
Yeah. We had a couple times on the show now. We've had Stephen Weiner, who was there for the first couple years of late night. He's the guy. He and his writing partner Carl are the guys who discovered Calvert DeForest and brought them, and similar sentiments. Okay, we see something. There's potential here. Let's throw it in and see how it looked. I mean, he was in the cold open of the original late night was Calvert DeForest. It was the first thing you ever saw.
This is CBS.
Yeah, well, that too. Well, and then the first thing you ever saw on Late Show was also Calvert DeForest. So yeah,
Right.
that bookend is really, really neat. But it was kind of a very similar sentiment. It's like, okay, there's potential here, so let's just put it forward and see kind of how it evolves. And in cases like Calvert, but or Joe was on 100 and some odd times, 112 times, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, exactly, right? Like
that's insane.
Yeah,
that is insane. No wonder why they canceled us. That's ridiculous. 100 times. That's insane.
Oh wait, here's where the train went off the tracks. It was right there.
Seriously, that man should not be on national TV in the triple digits. That's disgraceful.
I'll tell you why I love Joe so much is because, and it's a similar. I have a similar affection for you.
I don't think that sentence has ever been said before, but please go ahead.
Joe's wife is gonna love this episode.
Yeah.
And who am I kidding? She's not gonna watch. Nobody's gonna watch this, but that's okay. I love the fact that Gen Xers started writing for Dave. I love that because again, when I was a kid watching adults being silly, and then I got to see people who were people kind of like me, born around the same time that I was and whatnot, being part of the show and writing for an older Dave. I also love that as well. There's a and this kind of leads over to kind of a nice little through line. Letterman shows up on the air. There are Carson fingerprints a little bit, over the years. Not only Carson protecting him and starting on the 12:30 part, but then, when Dave moves over to CBS, things like Peter LaSalle coming over, and of course Carson himself kind of anointing what you guys were doing. I think of Mulholland and Barry, guys like that who were writers for Carson for years and now contributors to Late Show, Carson himself.
Yeah.
And then as things evolve further, Late Show ends in 2015. And I do want to go back to that in a minute here, but that ends. And now we see folks who worked for Dave going on to different projects. And I just love this whole evolution, the tapestry that's being created real time that we've seen in our lives here. You're on the Tonight Show now. With some Letterman folk, including Joe now, which is lovely. It must have felt good to pick him up out of the wilderness. I don't know if you had anything to do with that or not, but
no.
Do you guys work together or are you in different departments?
No. We write the monologue together, and we collaborate here and there. So it's great. I love having Joe. I mean, Joe is a great writer. So it's I'm thrilled to death to have him. I really am. Or to be able to work with him again.
And then the other folks that are there too, which is lovely. Is it an unspoken thing that part of what you guys bring to the table is adding a little bit of a Letterman sensibility to Fallon, or is it a brand new skill where it's like, no, we got to learn a new voice, we got to be writing for this voice now, and the sensibility is 100% different, and that's a skill that you have evolved and grown in your tool chest of skills?
It's completely different. Well, first of all, keep in mind, like late night, or I guess in any show, but your job is never to be funny. Your job is to be funny through the voice of whoever's hosting the show.
Right.
It just so happens with my first job with Dave, that's what made me want to do this. There was no adjustment or anything like that.
That voice was easy to access.
Right. And then I worked for Larry Wilmore, and he had his voice. And then now I work for Jimmy, and he has his voice. And I think everybody has that, whoever you work for. But we are not asked to bring a Letterman vibe at all. It's like, no, Jimmy knows exactly what he wants to do. So he doesn't want. So my job is not to adapt to bend the show to my voice. It's to bend my voice to Jimmy's, as well. It should be. It's Jimmy's name on the marquee. It's his show. Whatever he wants, I'm happy to do. So it's. I mean, it's very different, obviously, but it's never about bending anything to me. It's always about bending myself to whoever I'm working for.
That makes sense. What are some things that are similar? Because I mean, you're in the grind for Late Show. Larry Wilmore, and then you kind of get back into that 11:35, the marquee of
Yeah.
late night TV. You kind of get back into that, just a different
Yeah.
franchise, obviously. 30 Rock. I mean, the mystique of 30 Rock. We haven't even gotten into that. You must enjoy working
Yeah.
for 30 Rock.
I do.
Working
I
at,
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that are the same?
Well, Mulligan, Gerard used to always say, funny is funny. And he, at the time I thought he'd lost his mind. I didn't know what the hell that meant. But, as
And
I
quite
got
well,
older,
perhaps he might have.
yes. Oh, that happened a long time ago. But it's like funny is funny. I
Yeah.
mean, so if there is a funny take for almost anything that doesn't have to be, how can I say this? If you know what it is, if you write something funny, it's funny. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who the host is. I mean, maybe you make some little adjustments or you calibrate it a little differently because, maybe you don't want to make it as snarky or as ironic, or maybe you want to do it this or that. But I really firmly believe that in all these shows that, I mean, people will probably think I'm crazy here, but I think there is a large amount of material that could live on any of these shows.
Yeah.
I really do. It's like we would do, like, there are several pieces or kinds of pieces I would do for Letterman that, could exist on the Tonight Show and vice versa. As far as, and there are other pieces that couldn't, just because they're different. One's not better or worse; they're just different. But I think in an odd way, for when you take, let's say, a monologue joke, and obviously a monologue joke, you're writing it on a certain story of the day.
Yeah.
Most news story, like a guy I work with says, every story has a take. You just have to find that take. So in that case,
That's a great way of looking at it. That's a great way of bite-sizing the job and simplifying it so it's fathomable.
Right. So then I think the question is, you might present it differently depending on who you work for, but the take remains the same. Right. And so, when I'm sitting there writing monologue jokes for Jimmy, it's like, well, what is the take? That's really what you're thinking about. So I think people would be surprised, that in that the middle area of that Venn diagram is probably bigger than most people think. Like, I find a lot of if I have developed any skills over the years, I find that those are the same skills I'm using for the Tonight Show now. And I feel like the calibrations are, again, or maybe how a joke is presented, or, there's some fine tuning involved, but I don't know. I don't think it's that different. But that's not to say that doesn't present a challenge for I'll give you a perfect example. I have found, when I think about all the writers at the old place at Dave, that, let's say we're fired, we're fired, that didn't get picked up. And I'm not just saying this, a large, a huge percentage of those people weren't fired because they weren't funny, or because, they couldn't write a joke. They could. I mean, it was more that they might have had trouble adjusting to the voice of the show.
Yes.
And, because they might have had such a strong voice already. Like I remember we had a writer on the show, and she was a stand-up. And I liked her stand-up very much. And maybe one of the reasons is that I didn't do stand-up is because I don't have a voice of my own, really. So I am kind of malleable. I could write for this person or this person or that person.
Yeah.
Whereas she had such a strong voice that, like, I didn't want to see her adapt to Dave's voice, because I don't want to, I was sort of jealous of this person having such a strong voice. And I just thought, I don't know, do you really want to be writing top 10 jokes? Because she was so funny. And I bring this up because she did have a little trouble adjusting to the voice of the show, but in a way it made perfect sense, because I'm thinking, as a stand-up, your job is to convey your voice.
Yes.
The job here is to convey that guy's voice.
Yes.
And, so I just found that sort of interesting to view. In order to be successful in late night TV, you really do have to kind of bury whatever voice you do have. And for a stand-up, I just felt like, well, I don't want you to bury that voice. I'm not saying you can't do both. And because I'm not a stand-up, maybe it's not as difficult as it is. But as a layperson, when it comes to stand-up, it does seem difficult to me. Like, how do you? Because I remember she would often say, like, "Oh no, after this, I'm going here. I got a show here. I got a set here," which was always so impressive to me. But I would always think, like, how do you go back and forth so much? But I don't know. It's something I still think about. But again, this is my very, very long-winded way of saying that, because I feel like, yeah, we all have a little germ of a voice. I don't know how much. I feel like a hired hand. And if I mean, that's not to say I could work for any show. I mean, there's certainly some things out there I'm sure I just couldn't do. But I feel like if I could find that take, I think that Joe can be calibrated to work for this person or that person. I don't know if whatever I said made any sense whatsoever.
Oh, are you kidding me? Oh my God. No. Like, okay. So, well, it made sense in a couple ways. I want to have folks who booked talent. I want to have some of the bookers on this show very, very badly because of something you touched on right there. I mean, I've had Eddie Brill on twice, and Eddie, he talked about how there are so many comics. I mean, it's the same thing, different department. I mean, okay, you wrote for the show. He booked comics for the show. So many talented comics that just weren't right for that stage, but they were incredible. But he couldn't bring them on for whatever reason or another. And I mean, there's harmless reasons. The simplest being, their sensibility might have been a little bit too, as they used to say in the old days, a little too blue or whatever. But there were comedians, and I'm super curious. I want to talk to, because I'm a huge music guy. I would love to talk to some of the people who booked music acts on the show for that very reason. Like, was there a certain voice of obviously genre? You guys did everything, but no, I what you're saying makes perfect sense and is extremely insightful. Like your brethren, you downplay many of the words that you say, but no, that's fascinating to me. There's a couple places that I want to go before we finish up here. Oh, hey, okay. So I said this to Joe after Joe, and I fully had the realization. I found out that Joe was working for The Tonight Show moments before I hit the record button. And I was overjoyed for him because it's like, oh, that's fantastic. And again, I love this evolutionary thing where, Letterman folk are now doing other things in the world in big things. And you guys are doing big things. Congratulations to you on that, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much.
No problem. Then about 45 minutes after the interview, I sent him an email and it's like, wait a second, do I actually have like a through line, like a pitch line to the Tonight Show? And he's like, well, I do the monologue and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of, there are different,
as do I. Yeah.
I wanted to, I told this to Stephen Weiner on last week's episode, and I want to throw it at you. This gives you some insight as to the insane person I am. Sports fans do fantasy booking, this fighter versus that fighter, who would win, Ali or Tyson, that kind of a thing. Comic book fans do the same thing. What happened if Thor fought Superman, that kind of a thing. I do late show fantasy booking, that kind of stuff, late night TV kind of stuff. One of the moments I loved so much, and I don't know if you'll remember this, you were probably a page when it happened. Dave would call up, especially in the early years, he would call up Carson. Yeah. My opinion, any chance he got, he would call up Carson and do something. One night he called up Carson and said, hey, can we use Stump the Band? And and so I'm gonna throw something at you that's just, take it, leave it, call me I am a fool, so don't feel any obligation whatsoever, other than me just throwing this out there. I have this fantasy, if you want to call it that, of Fallon calling up Letterman real time, just like he did to Johnny. It's the Tonight Show and the Late Show. Like, to me, that just seems right. And asking him permission to use elevator races. And then
Mhm.
maybe the celebrity, whoever is on the Tonight Show, has an elevator race in the same building with the celebrity, whoever's on Seth that night or whatever. And they have like, I love the idea of the symmetry between shows. And I'm not just saying this for vanity, just to throw out to a Tonight Show writer, my idea. Is there any, this is my question for you, is there any nostalgia of the fact that you do work for, famously, the institution that David Letterman wanted to work for his entire life, and said something even better happened with Late Show, which changed the entire industry? Now you're working for that franchise. Is there any nostalgia? Are you present right now knowing that, holy cow, there's some real history here that I've moved from this franchise over to this franchise?
Yes, that is very cool, but it's more that, yes, that's the short answer. I also, as you said earlier, working in 30 Rock,
yes,
is just fantastic.
Is it magic? It looks like it's magic. Is it magic?
I mean, when I was growing up, because I was such a fan of Saturday Night Live, and then if you think about the biggest comedy movies at that point were all written, directed, and starring SNL alum, that for me, 30 Rock was and is the epicenter of the comedy world.
Yep.
So like to be there now, and to be able to walk through those doors is amazing. During the summer, right before we started, like I think it was a 2-week break, Jimmy bought champagne for everyone, and we had a champagne toast, and he had just come off the show, finished taping the show, so we used the studio, which is empty, next door. What is that? That's where Dave taped Late Night.
Yep.
That was the first time I was ever in it. I'd never seen it. It's funny. I was telling these 2 women that I work with, and they are so bored to death of my stories about working for Dave. But I was saying to them, I'm saying, like, we're standing 5 feet from where Dave's desk was. Like that to me.
Yep.
Again, as much as I loved working for Late Show, to me, Late Night was the thing.
Yes.
And like to be able to stand in that place is crazy. And then, like Joe and I were talking about this, because like then I'm looking at where the blue doors are, and I'm thinking, well, that's where Andy Kaufman walked through after the Jerry Lawler incident. That's where Mulligan's actually standing there. That's it. And which reminds me of something else I should mention, but those were the blue doors where Dave would throw the football or whatever against the door of when they were taping Live at 5. And like that corridor, I mean, Dave that show had that Muppet Show, even though, I might be driving the Muppet Show thing into the ground.
You're not.
Again, that was that mentality was back then about like, let's go in the hallway and let's talk to the page and let's do all these things. So when I go to Jimmy's studio and I walk down that corridor, I can't walk down that corridor without just getting knocked out by it.
That's fantastic.
It's just really, really, I mean, it's a hallway, but if Dave was as important to you as it was to me, that corridor was, so much history took place right there. Yep. So it really is remarkable. So for both things, like to be able to have written for the Late Show and now the Tonight Show is, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it's an honor. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's like, I think about like, especially because the Late Show began so long ago. Like I think about like if my dad had said to me, I wrote for Jackie Gleason, or I wrote for Lucille Ball, or so to be able to, and look, I'm under no illusions here. I was the smallest part of that world. I feel fortunate that I could say that I'm a part of Dave's legacy. It's all Dave. But however small a part I played, and it was small, I just feel, so monumentally honored to have said, well, I was there. And like, that's the way I feel now at the Tonight Show. I mean, I really do. I mean, it's, I, not everyone gets to do this. I would love to sit here and tell you I was able to do this because I'm so gifted or so talented. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm really not. So when I look back, I'm thinking like, I don't say to myself like, man, I'm really good that I was able to do this. I say, holy shit, I am so fortunate. And so even when you have a bad day, then you say like, what are you complaining about? It's like, how bad? I'm writing jokes for a living. So it's a gift. It really is.
There's no better place to kind of wrap up or get close to wrapping up than that. I appreciate the gratefulness that you have in this so much. I guess I'm trying to think. You kind of threw a curveball at me there, Lee, because it's just what a perfect little bow that you've just tied on this episode. I have many other things I would like to ask you. I think I'm going to table them for now.
Yeah.
Will you come back and can we do this another
Absolutely.
time?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I got so many
Yeah.
ideas. I want to get writers who work together on here, kind of simulcast and
Sure.
throw questions out and just let that go. And just, I can sit back and just revel. I want to
that'd
get
be great.
writers who never worked together before. I think it'd be kind of fun to have, like an O'Donnell and a Joe for or O'Donnell and you, kind of a thing. I'd love to make that happen as well, and just see the things that are the same, see the things that are different, all that kind of stuff. Please know how appreciated you are. You are so on brand when you diminish and talk about how small a part you are. You're on brand for everybody who worked for Dave. That just seems to be one of the things, including from Dave himself, who does the same thing. You're so on brand, but you need to understand how appreciated you are. I hope you do.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to do a quick outro and then we'll say our goodbye privately, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, 1 second here.
Sure.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is why I do this show, is for conversations like this. I would do it if we had no audience whatsoever. Shockingly, it looks like the audience is growing. I can't believe that. I'm so excited about that because it just means that we're going to do more of them. And I hope that you're enjoying it. If you are, we would love a like, a share, a subscribe. I cannot wait for the time that I don't have to ask that anymore. And I can just focus this part on like contests of things that we're giving away and all sorts of fun things that we're going to do in the community. We've got because I am an old man, we've got a Facebook group. I'm not exactly sure how else to get us to corral us all together to enjoy this stuff together, but please feel free to join the Facebook group. The show, of course, we have one sponsor on this show. The Letterman podcast is brought to you in part by the Hello Deli, Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Go to hello-deli.com if you want any official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise or Rupert merchandise. He packs it carefully, lovingly himself. If you ask him really nicely, your t-shirt, your mug, whatever it is, if you ask him really nicely, he might add onions to that order. This has been Lee Ellenberg, a phenomenal episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night. Dude, thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Overcoat and underpants.